Hello everyone. We are happy to come here for sharing our research. I'm C.K. Bletchley Chen. I and my colleague, Inndy and Jiang, will share our research. Chimera IPT Group targets Taiwan semiconductor vendors. So first, let me introduce ourselves. I'm Zhonghuan Chen. You can just call me CK. And my Twitter ID is Bletchley13. I'm a security researcher. After I get my PhD degree from National Jiao Tong University, I joined the CyCraft as a senior researcher. And when in university, I have published some research in academic conference. And I also published some research in a technical conference like the Recon, VSCon, Recon First, and Cobalt Open Talk. I'm also a retired CTF player. I'm a founder of Bamboo Fox CTF team in National Jiao Tong University. And I also have experience to join the DEFCON final CTF in 2016 and 2018. I also lead our student to join some bug bounty program and discover some vulnerabilities in QNAP and Synergy. I'm also an active member in Taiwan's security community. I'm a member of CHRoot, which is the best hacker group in Taiwan. And this year, HitCon 2020, I will be a chairman of HitCon editorial committee. And my partner, Jiang, he is a security researcher in CyCraft and also have published his research in HitCon. And he also founded a Taiwan local hacker group, UCCU Hacker. And Indy Lin, he is also the researcher, security researcher at CyCraft, and mainly focus on malware analysis and detection. And he also have shared his research in HitCon and Recon, and often give the training in local security community. He is a reverse engineering hobbyist. And from his high school, he started to learn reverse engineering for game hacking and CTF. So we also introduced our company, CyCraft. CyCraft is a startup company in Taiwan, which is just moved to its third year after its startup. And our company focuses on using AI to help solving the security problem. Currently, we have three products. The first one is Zenser, which is used for threat hunting, and Cycera, which is used for APT investigation, and CyberTotal is a threat intelligence platform. With the help of this system, we can quickly analyze and analyze the APT campaign. So today our talk is a lot helped by these products. And our company also joined the MITRE ATT&CK evaluation in last year and competing with many top security vendors in the world and get a very nice result. If you are interested about it, you can reference to our public report in our blog. This is today's outline. We will first give the introduction about Taiwan's semiconductor industry, and then we will illustrate the APT group Chimera that we discovered in these 2 years. And then we will go through the case study to understand the activities of threat actors. And then we will go deeper to see the threat actors' digital arsenal, which introduce the malware and technical used by attacker. And then we will make the conclusion. Because Taiwan has a very special political position, so we always being attacked every year. In 2018, the TSMC, one of the largest semiconductor vendors in Taiwan or even the world, is attacked by ransomware WannaCry. This attack held down their production line for 2 days and make the cost about 170 million. In 2019, Kaspersky has discovered the Shadow Hammer, which is a supply chain attack targeting ASUS. And in this year, our critical infrastructure is being attacked by a cold lock ransomware. The CPC is an energy sector, and who has a lot of gas stations. So in this attack, a lot of the gas station is out of service and make many inconvenient and economy cost to Taiwan. Among this industry, I think the semiconductor vendor is most important to Taiwan. And many people will say that the semiconductor is most important industry in Taiwan. That's because our government has paid a lot of resources to develop and help these vendors. And now Taiwan has already established ourselves as a leading player in this industry. And we have some well-known leaders, include TSMC and MTK. In 2018, our wafer capacity is to take the first place in the world. And in 2019, our market sharing is take the fourth place in the world. According to Taiwan's news, we are the largest and fast-growing semiconductor equipment maker and make the revenue about 12 million. All of this show that Taiwan takes a very important role in the semiconductor landscape. So once an attack to Taiwan's semiconductor vendors happen, it will make a very serious impact, like the TSMC ransomware. So first, because this vendor take a lot of part in Taiwan's economy, so the attack to this vendor will of course make a serious impact to Taiwan's economy. And in the same time, it will also affect the entire global supply chain. Even though many research about this area will focus on the OT security, but in this report, we want to remind that IT attacks can be as dangerous as the OT attacks. In the attack to OT, for example, they may make your production line halt, and make it immediately damage. And compared to that, the attack to IT, for example, leaks some important intelligence property. Even so, you will not immediately identify the damage, but it will have a long-term impact to the enterprise. So both the OT attack and IT attacks should be taken care and has equally important. As CyCraft is a Taiwan local security company, so we have a very high visibility in semiconductor vendors in Taiwan. And between 2018 and 2019, we have monitored several attacks on these vendors. And mostly victims are located at the Hsinchu Science Park. And Hsinchu Science Park is a center of Taiwan's high-tech industry, especially for the semiconductor vendors. And we have published our first version of the report in April this year. And after we published our report, we received a lot of feedback from other security researchers, other vendors, and our cooperation partner and our friend, and revealed that more than 7 vendors were targeted by the same threat actor. So I would say that this attack is very intensive. The threat actor have the ability to launch a large-scale attack to many vendors at the same time. And the other noticeable point is that the attacker had a very in-depth understanding of the semiconductor industry. This attack is not choose their victim randomly, but their attack is very precise and well coordinated. Aside from the vendor themselves, their subsidiaries, competitor, and cooperation vendors in the supply chain will also be targeted. So I would say that the APT attack is from the past, which only attacked a single enterprise, a single point attack, to attack the supply chain. Now they are attacking on the entire industry surface. As the activities, attack technique, and tactics were very similar, so what we believe this was the work of the same threat actor. And we call this threat actor the group Chimera. They are targeting the security vendors in Taiwan and then use some malware which is merged from different open source or commercial product. In our case, we discovered Dumpert, Mimikatz, and Cobalt. So that's why we named it Chimera. Just like the Chimera is a merge of a different animal. Their malware is merged from the several open source malware. And in order to avoid attribution, their C2 is hosted in public cloud, like the Google App Engine and Azure. And their goal is mostly focused on intelligent properties. They try to steal document, source code, SDK of some projects related to chip. So from here we can understand the motivation of an attacker. Here is our investigation overview. Our investigation period is in 2018 to 2019. And we investigate more than 3 vendors and analyze totally more than 30,000 endpoints. In today, we will share you 2 case studies. Why we choose these 2 vendors? The first reason is that these 2 vendors take a leading global position in their market segment. And the second reason is that because we get into investigation at a different timing. So an analytical perspective of the attack campaign was also different. For A company, he is our long-term partner. So we regularly monitor their activities, which allow us to find more detail of the attacker's activities. And this information also enables us to track back to the root cause. So in the case study of A company, we want to show you the activities of hackers and the root cause, how to track in the root cause. In the case study of a B company, it's a one-time IR service. So when we start the investigation, the attack is already happened for a long time. So we cannot recover everything back. But what we have is that we can monitor and identify the long-term activities of the threat actors. And we identify what kind of data, what kind of file was stolen by the attacker. So what data was leaked in this case. So next, we will turn to our analyst, Jiang, to share these 2 case studies.
Okay, thanks to CK. So I'm Jiang, and I will next present about the 2 case study. And before we start the case study, I just want to mention the following slide, and every machine and the username are the identifier, and these are not the original name. And the first case study we want to use is the A company. So following is the A company status overview. So A company is our long-term partner. So the threat actor activity date is very short time with discovery and stop. And we found that 15 endpoint and 6 user account were compromised. And we found 4 malware and 8 C2 server. And we will introduce on the C2 server and the malware later on. And the right hand side is our NI generate investigation graph about tell us what endpoint has been compromised and the compromised endpoint how to when the lateral movement to the another endpoint and the dropper which malware. So it's a simple timeline to help investigator to understand what happened on this environment. And the first malware we found is the Cobalt Strike beacon. Cobalt Strike beacon, the threat actor use a Cobalt Strike beacon and pretend as a Google update. And the Cobalt Strike beacon also will migrate the payload into the other process. The first, we found the Cobalt Strike beacon, we searched on the files total, and we found nothing. And the exploit means the threat actor possibly customize their different malware backdoor for the different user and the account, and the endpoint. So we found the two different file hash in the two endpoints. And the Cobalt Strike beacon has a user hosting service for their C2 communication. So these are hard to identify for the network security device, and because the Google, they use Google pretend as a Google update, and they connect to a Google Cloud service. So it feels like a reasonable, very logical. But it's an interesting point is about the first day the threat actor use a Google Cloud platform, but the second day after they get the new endpoint, they switch the hosting server. This is quite interesting. But in our investigator point of view, we think because the threat actor is a team, so every operator has their different they prefer use the different hosting server and the hosting service. So they switch the hosting service to another provider. And we found PC-SHENNA is deployed from the server LORRUN. So how they deploy is they use a scheduled task, and there's a task time is before the employee get off work. So because they pretend as a Google update, and even they trigger the security alert, maybe they will handle the security event tomorrow. Because there's a Google update, maybe the binary has an update, so trigger the first party for the antivirus. So there's a reason they execute the attack before the get off work. And then we trace back to the server LORRUN. So we found there's a tool remote execution tool in the server LORRUN. So they use a benign program like the schedule tasker and the WNIC. So the schedule tasker actually use in a multiple endpoint, and the reason they use a schedule tasker not just for the persistence, they use a schedule tasker just for the execution, and they also use a WNIC. But there's an interesting point about why the threat actor use the WNIC and the schedule tasker. Why they just choose one tool? Why they use a multiple tool? The reason they use the WNIC and the schedule tasker is WNIC can use the WNIC can use a cache credential. And the second is WNIC can get the STD out information. So in this thread, they use the WNIC to check the network communication, check the endpoint has a network communication to the internet. And they use a schedule taker to deploy their malware. And we trace back to the server LORRUN, so we can, due to the previous finding, we can add to the information to server LORRUN has later moved to the 3 endpoint. And we found the server has remotely collected the registry and the NTDS.DIT in the server, in the domain controller. And they use archive tool. The archive tool is renamed as recordtv.ms. So they collect these two files, registry and the NTDS.DIT. So why? So I will quickly explain the NTDS.DIT. NTDS.DIT is the Windows 8 data, which it contains the Windows 8 username, password, email account, something like this, all the useful information in the 8 environment. But the database is encrypted. So the encrypted key is stored in the registry. So that's why the reason the threat actor need to collect the registry and the NTDS.DIT file. So the threat actor already collected the AD database. And why the server has this kind of malicious activity? So our NI investigation tell us before the attack start, there's a NB-CLAIR schedule task deploy the Cobalt drives beacon to a server login. So as you can see the screenshot, there's a schedule task to the server login and use Google update pretend as use Cobalt strike and pretend as Google update. And there is a one-time execution, and it start at the 1958. So we trace back to the NB-CLAIR. So in the NB-CLAIR timeline, we discover the Skeletonkey were executed in 1958. But the command has been executed is just before the 6 minutes ago before the 1958. So we checked the timeline. We found there's before the command execute, there's IP1 has a RDP to NB-CLAIR. So this is highly suspicious the root cause of this attack. So after the threat actor RDP to the NB-CLAIR, they use the anti-user to do some reconnaissance about the user information because the environment username are serialized, so they can enumerate the environment domain account to get some information, and they store the information on the recordtv.lib.log. So after they collect this data and they use the recordtv.ms to do the data exfiltration. So they use a 1-byte modifier WinIR software and rename as recordtv.ms and uncheck.dmp and jucheck.exe pertain as the legit software. And the same file has been found in the other endpoint. So based on the previous technique and the legit software install, we think this signature technique about our report Operation Chimera. And we check back into the who RTP the NB-CLAIR. So we found there's IP1, and IP1 is on scan host and relate to the many user account in the whole environment. So we check into the IP1. So we found there's a share host, and it's a VPN host. So VPN host can be compromised. So in our opinions, we think never use a VPN as the only line of your defense. These above are the first case study. and I will introduce a second case study about the becoming. And the becoming is a IR case, and I just want to quick overview about why we do the IR case about the becoming. Because becoming already been compromised, but they don't know, and becoming has a big business collaboration with C company, and the C company is our friend, and due to the business collaboration, B company and C company has a network communication, and the C company security discovers some anomaly activity from B company. So C company introduced us to the help investigation on the B company. So B company has been hacked starting the 2018 and until the 2019. And then we look into the 140,000 event, and we found 40 compromised endpoint and a lot of the data leak. And the becoming case study, we didn't find a Google update, but we found a lesser Powershell attack. And they use the Powershell attack as they use the Powershell script and execute the Cobalt strike beacon and migrate to the SVC host. And we found this Powershell attack on the 10 endpoints and crossing and include the 2 domain controller. And just like the first case study, the C2 communication is use hosting server. So like the Google Cloud Platform, and also in this case study, you also use Microsoft Azure. So it's hard to track down the threat actor. Just like we previously mentioned, the becoming already has a serious hack. So the human investigation is hard to address what endpoint has been compromised. So we use our AI investigator to help us to figure out what happened in the environment. And we also, so this graph is our AI generate. And this graph also tells us the domain controller already has been compromised, and the domain controller also connect to this unmanaged endpoint. It means we didn't scan the endpoint. So it tells us our investigator to need to do some investigation about this endpoint to check the compromised scope. And because the threat starting the 2018, they already has compromised the becoming. And they come back every quarterly to get some new file, new information on the big company. And but the compromised scope didn't extend until 2019 November. The threat actor deployed a new weapon we call Skeletonkey Injector. And after the Skeletonkey Injector deployed, the threat actor has extended their compromised scope. So it means the Skeletonkey Injector works for them to get the environment. So our colleague will introduce the malware part in the next one later on. And we found in the first case study and the second case study, the threat actor used a similar password schema to archive the IR file, and they pretend the WinIR software as a Recon TV, JU check, firmware.log, something like digital file name. And the threat actor has collected the leak file name. Has collected a leak file which we de-identify, and just like they collect the project project roadmap, and the backup workspace, and the chip and SDK information, and the installation guide. So our assumption is the threat actor is not just for cracking the environment. They are doing this stealing the intelligence property. So we think the threat actor is possibly is a business spy or state sponsor attack to benefit some country want to benefit their certain industry. So we are not sure which one, but we can feel sure is the threat actor target is just for the stealing the intelligence property. So the target very straightforward. So this my part to the case study, and I will to turn to our next presenter, Inndy.
Hi, I'm Inndy, reverse engineer from CyCraft. I'm going to introduce the actor's digital arsenal. We want to share 3 main tools they used to carry out this attack. The first we are going to talk about is Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is a commercial red team operation framework. They use Cobalt Strike beacon as their primary backdoor in these intrusions. For the persistency, they override Google Chrome update utility with their Cobalt Strike beacon. Thus, there is no any new auto-run entry was created, so it will lower the chance to be caught. We found this backdoor on several companies, so we link the intrusions events together. Cobalt Strike has 2 components, Stager and Beacon. Stager is a little shellcode that can load another payload. It will be useful if the payload size was limited, or you don't want to deploy entire backdoor to the victim. Beacon is the full function backdoor. Just like any other backdoor, it has capability to transfer files, set up tunnel, code execution, and others. Our product detected some suspicious memory block which contains a Cobalt Strike beacon. As you can see on the slide, it is a PE file and a shellcode payload. So, Cobalt Strike beacon and Metasploit interpreter both use this technique, the hybrid payload. This technique is to embed shellcode into the PE file header. The PE magic header, MZ, could be decoded as valid instructions. It will be decoded as POP R10 under 64-bit architecture, and decrease EBP POP EDX under 32-bit architecture. These instructions will work fine in most of contexts, so you can ignore these instructions and append shellcode after it. The shellcode will locate its address and execute the reflective loader to load PE image in memory. It is this assembly output of Stager. There are 2 types of Stager. One uses NamePipe. Another uses WinHTTP library. So, Stager could be used to download payload from remote server or being used during process migration. Cobalt Strike uses a special strategy to inject payload into other process. First, Cobalt Strike will spawn a new process or choose the existing process as target. Then, it will inject the shellcode into the target process. We call the shellcode Stager. The real payload will be transferred through named pipe and then executed by Stager. This strategy will bypass some sandbox or emulation-based scanning. Here is the WinRAR. It is a popular compression software. It was used in this operation. The actor uses rar.exe to compress and encrypt the files they stole. They tried to ambiguate the program with existing path recorded tv.library-ms in the same folder. The reason why we mention this file is different from the original one. So we grab this old version of WinRAR and compare it with the one that actor used. We found the difference part was located in code section, and such patch may crash the program. We have two hypotheses. First is the actor changed the byte to make file hash different. So hash-based detection will not find that file is rar.exe. If your organization do not use WinRAR, the file may be detected and trigger some investigation. The second hypothesis, it was uploaded to VirusTotal in 2009. We think it is just a bit flip during copy, judged by the file age. It is highly possible at that time. Now we are going to talk about the most interesting malware used in this operation, the Skeletonkey injector. We found a unique malware that made with two open source hacking tools, Dumpert and MITRE. I believe everyone here had heard about MITRE. It is a well-known hacking tool to dump credentials from LSAS.exe memory. But it has more capability like bypass group policy and spawn command line prompt, task manager, or registry editor. This malware has been found on at least 10 domain controllers. So, we found bunches of forwarded import entry and indicates that it is a DLL proxy. Actor exploits DLL hijacking vulnerability to persist and escalate privileges. Maybe you don't know this hacking tool. Dumpert is made by the security company called Outblank. It is a proof of concept program to use direct system call on Windows. Unlike Linux, we can't directly use system call in shellcode because Windows system call numbers changed from release to release. The only stable interface is exported function from the shell libraries. That's why Windows shellcode must rely on them, and always begins with locating functions in memory by traverse PEB, loaded data, and PE structures. So, how do Dumpert doing it? First, it uses RTL get version to determine Windows version, and select different embedded shellcode, embedded system call functions depend on the Windows version. After that, you can bypass any user space hook and doing anything you want without trigger alert or get blocked. And here is a code shows that how does Dumpert embed system call in its body. It will choose the different embedded system call functions. For the one who don't know what Skeletonkey is, Skeletonkey is an APT malware discovered by Dell SecureWorks in 2015. It will implant a backdoor password to domain controller in an Active Directory environment. Then, attacker can authenticate as any user as they want with the backdoor password. Meanwhile, original password was never affected. Any other wrong password still will be rejected. So, how does Skeletonkey implement it? It will alter the authentication flow by hooking some crypto functions in LSAS.exe, more specifically in KDC service, the key distribution service. Although original Skeletonkey malware was never released publicly, author of MITRE still made his own implementation. The actor made Skeletonkey injector by merging Dumpert and Mimicuts. They copied necessary code from Dumpert and Mimicuts, then modify functions in Mimicuts to use embedded system call functions from Dumpert. So, if your protection product did not use mini filter driver, which means did not put a hook in kernel space, the Skeletonkey will be invisible. Skeletonkey is a very powerful weapon against Active Directory because you don't need to dump administrator credentials for lateral movements. If you use administrator credential to access endpoints in a domain, you may trigger a lot of alerts. But if you log in with normal users, the situation will be different. It leaves nearly no clue, only bunches of logon success events. Most administrator or investigator will ignore normal user logon events easily. And Skeletonkey cannot be removed easily without reboot. It will be painful to reboot all your domain controllers because you may break your organization's daily routine. Now, CK will make a conclusion for us about this talk.
Finally, let me give some conclusion about our research. So here is some takeaway. In this report, we disclosed a large-scale APT attacks targeting semiconductor vendors, and more than 7 vendors were compromised. And this attack is a precisely attack, and targeting leading semiconductor vendors, and also attack their subsidiaries, partners, and competitors. And their goal is stealing intelligent properties, document, source code, and SDK, which will make a long-term damage to the victim. In the technical part, the attacker utilized various open source and general tools to make the attribution harder, and they will merge the different kind of malware and insert their customized code to make their own malware. In the 2 case study we are shared, the AD and VPN was compromised, which shows that enterprise should consider the resilience of their IT system and avoid to relying on a single security service. And the technical Skeletonkey is used in this case, and this technical is rarely used in the past. However, it's a powerful weapon which can make adversaries log in like a normal user for the purpose of persistent and defense evasion. In the end, there are no systems safe. We should regularly do the threat hunting and shorten the mean time to detect and mean time to response. So thank you for your listening. And if you have any question, welcome to ask the questions on Discord. Thank you again.